You know people underestimate what it means to confront genuine malevolence. They think it's just another argument, another disagreement, another toxic person they can simply walk away from. But that's naive, because when you face a demonic narcissist, and I use that word deliberately, you are confronting something archetypal, something ancient, something that reaches into the very structure of good and evil itself. Keynote: when you defeat a demonic narcissist, the first thing that happens is a collapse, a complete and terrifying implosion of the illusion they've carefully constructed to maintain their sense of superiority and control. You have to understand their entire psychological structure is built upon the belief that they are untouchable, that their manipulations are invisible, that the world will always bend to their will. Every lie they tell, every mask they wear, every act of deceit is part of an elaborate architecture designed to protect one fragile idea that they are in control. So when that illusion shatters, when you stand up to them, expose them, or simply stop reacting the way they expect, it's as if their entire identity begins to unravel before their eyes. What you're witnessing in that moment is not just anger or confusion, it's existential panic. The narcissist's collapse isn't always visible at first. It begins internally in the silent corners of their mind where they cannot bear to confront their own powerlessness. For perhaps the first time in their life, they are being forced to face a reality that does not revolve around them. They sense with dreadful clarity that their manipulation no longer works, that their charm has lost its power, and that their psychological dominance over you has been broken. It's a profound humiliation for them, a mirror held up to their own emptiness. You see, their ego cannot survive without external validation. It's parasitic by nature. When that source of validation, which was once you, is cut off or exposed, their entire psychological scaffolding begins to shake. They will often respond to this collapse with denial. They tell themselves that you didn't win, that you're delusional, that you're crazy, that you'll come crawling back. They'll invent a dozen alternate explanations for their loss, each more irrational than the last, because the truth that you saw through them is too unbearable. They can't allow themselves to admit defeat, because to do so would mean facing the void that has always existed beneath their grandiose exterior. And so they scramble. They try to reassert control through whatever means remain emotional manipulation, guilt, projection, or rage. But the tone has changed. The confidence is gone. There's a frantic edge to their behavior, a quiet tremor in their words that betrays the fear now consuming them. Internally, they're unraveling. Their sense of self is disintegrating because it was never real to begin with. It was a performance, a mask crafted to cover the deep inadequacy they've always tried to hide. Defeating them means tearing that mask off in front of the only audience that ever mattered, themselves. And that's why it feels like death to them. They can no longer escape into their fantasy of superiority. The power they thought they had over you vanishes like smoke, and what remains is a broken shell of a person, terrified of being ordinary, terrified of being forgotten, terrified of being seen as the fraud they secretly know they are. The collapse is emotional, psychological, even spiritual. They may oscillate wildly between arrogance and despair, one moment acting as if nothing has happened, and the next sinking into silent rage or victimhood. They might become obsessive, checking your social media, sending messages through others, or inventing new ways to draw your attention, because the loss of control over you is to them a loss of life force. You were their mirror, their audience, their supply, and without it, they start to decay from the inside out. This decay manifests as impulsive behavior, self-sabotage, even physical exhaustion. The energy they once devoted to maintaining their persona now collapses inward, leaving them fragmented and confused. If you watch closely, you'll notice their narrative begin to crumble. They start contradicting themselves, lashing out at people who once supported them, or retreating into isolation. The image they once projected of confidence, perfection, righteousness becomes harder and harder for them to sustain. They grow bitter, paranoid, and unpredictable. They sense that others can see what you've seen, and that realization terrifies them. The collapse becomes contagious. The illusion they've sold to everyone begins to lose its shine. Even those who once believed their lies begin to notice cracks. This fuels their panic, driving them further into self-destruction. It's crucial to recognize that this collapse is not repentance. It's not transformation. It's exposure. It's the truth seeping into their psyche like sunlight through broken glass. They may pretend to be remorseful. They may beg or cry. They may play the victim with convincing sincerity. But beneath it all is not humility, it's terror. They fear that without their facade, they are nothing. They've spent their entire existence constructing a false identity to escape that very thought. And now it's staring them in the face. Their collapse is not about guilt, it's about losing their weapon. The weapon was always control, and when that's gone, they are powerless. To defeat a demonic narcissist is to rip away the illusion that sustained them. It is to expose the fragile, frightened human behind the monstrous ego. Their reaction will be explosive, unpredictable, and desperate because they are fighting for psychological survival. You become, in their mind, the destroyer of their world, the one who dared to defy the narrative they built to keep their darkness hidden. And while they may appear to recover, putting on a new mask, pretending they've moved on, something inside them has permanently fractured. They know now that someone has seen the truth, and that knowledge haunts them like a shadow they can never outrun. ChatGPT said, "Exposure to truth is the most destructive force that can be unleashed upon a demonic narcissist because their entire existence depends on the maintenance of illusion. They construct a reality in which they are the center, the master, the savior, or the victim, whatever role serves their control in that moment. Truth is the one element that cannot be manipulated, cannot be twisted indefinitely, and cannot be subdued by charm or fear. When the truth finally pierces their carefully built fantasy, it's like driving light into a dark room where every lie, every manipulation, every false narrative begins to collapse under its own weight. The narcissist's identity is not built on authenticity, it's a performance, a psychological mask designed to conceal the deep rot of insecurity and shame underneath. So when the truth exposes them, they experience a kind of psychological death, an implosion of the false self that once held everything together. You see, to the narcissist, truth is not just uncomfortable, it's annihilating. Their mind is built to distort it, to rearrange it into shapes that serve their narrative. When they lie, they aren't merely deceiving others, they're trying to rewrite the very structure of reality itself. It's an act of self-preservation. The demonic narcissist cannot afford to face what's real because reality demands accountability, empathy, humility, all the qualities they've spent their lives rejecting. Truth holds a mirror up to them and reflects back the chaos they've inflicted, the pain they've caused, and the hollowness that lies beneath their grandiose facade. When that mirror is finally held up by someone who refuses to be manipulated, the narcissist's psyche begins to splinter. They feel cornered by something immovable, something they can't seduce or threaten into submission. The first reaction they have when truth begins to surface is fury. It's not ordinary anger. It's a primal, defensive rage that arises when the false self is threatened with exposure. They'll lash out in every direction, attacking the person who dared to speak the truth, attempting to bury it under noise, confusion, and emotional chaos. They'll accuse, deflect, and project. If you say they lied, they'll call you a liar. If you expose their cruelty, they'll play the victim. It's an inversion strategy meant to shift the spotlight away from their deceit and back onto your credibility. They must destroy the truth, tell her before the truth itself destroys them. This reaction isn't conscious. It's instinctual, like a cornered animal fighting for its life. But the truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. The narcissist senses this. They know deep down that their spell has been broken. When someone stops believing their lies, their power begins to disintegrate. Their manipulation depends on confusion and emotional dependence, and truth severs both. That's why they panic. They feel the grip of control slipping through their fingers. They know the illusion can't be fully restored once it's been punctured. You'll notice them becoming erratic, more desperate in their attempts to reshape the narrative. They'll try to convince others that you're the problem, that you're unstable or cruel, anything to shift the attention away from what's been revealed. It's a psychological counterattack, a last-ditch effort to protect the crumbling illusion from total collapse. Internally, this exposure is catastrophic. Their mind begins to fracture under the pressure of conflicting realities. On one hand, they need to believe their own lies to maintain their sense of superiority. On the other, the truth stands in front of them like an unmovable wall, silently defying their manipulation. This creates a cognitive dissonance so intense that they oscillate between denial and despair. They might appear calm one moment, then explode in rage the next. They might act as though nothing happened, pretending indifference, yet privately spiral into bitterness and paranoia. The truth doesn't just expose them to others, it exposes them to themselves, and that's the one confrontation they can't survive intact. They will often enter a phase of distortion following exposure. This is when they begin rewriting events, conversations, and memories to regain some sense of control. You'll hear them say things like, "That's not what happened," or "You misunderstood me," or "You're too sensitive." These statements are not just manipulation tactics, they're survival mechanisms. Their psyche literally cannot tolerate the truth as it stands. It's too threatening to the fragile structure of their false self. So they begin bending reality again, even more aggressively this time, trying to convince both you and themselves that their version is the only one that exists. They hope that through repetition, denial will become reality once more. But something irreversible has already occurred, the truth has been seen, and that awareness will haunt them. The exposure also disrupts their spiritual equilibrium. A demonic narcissist thrives in darkness because darkness provides cover. Lies are their oxygen, deceit is their comfort. Truth is light, and light burns. When it shines on their motives, their cruelty, their manipulation, it scorches the psychological fabric they hide behind. This exposure feels like spiritual suffocation to them. They can't rest, can't stop obsessing over how to undo it. They'll stalk, manipulate, and recruit others to their cause in a desperate attempt to restore the illusion of control. But the truth follows them. It becomes a shadow they can't shake, whispering reminders of what they've lost and who they truly are beneath the performance. You can see it in their eyes when they realize the truth has taken root. There's a flicker of fear that wasn't there before, a recognition that the game has changed forever. They might still smile, still perform, still pretend, but the confidence is gone. Inside, they are unraveling, consumed by the awareness that their power has limits. They once believed they could control perception itself, and now they see that truth is stronger than manipulation. That reality cannot be bent forever. That realization doesn't transform them, it corrodes them. The disintegration is slow but inevitable as truth continues to erode the foundation of lies they built their life upon, leaving them exposed, hollow, and terrified of the light they can no longer extinguish. ChatGPT said, when you defeat a demonic narcissist, one of their first psychological reactions is to rewrite history because they cannot coexist with the version of events that reveals their wrongdoing. The narcissist's sense of identity depends on the constant reinforcement of their superiority, their innocence, and their control. To accept the truth of what happened, to admit the abuse, the manipulation, or the failure would shatter the fragile illusion that sustains them. So they do what they've always done best. They distort reality. They begin to rearrange the story, bending the facts, reassigning blame, and crafting a new narrative in which they are once again the hero or the victim, never the perpetrator. It's not simply a lie told to others. It's a psychological necessity that protects them from the unbearable weight of self-awareness. This rewriting of history is not a conscious choice for them. It's an instinctual defense mechanism. Their entire existence is constructed around denial. When the truth threatens to surface, they go into mental overdrive, reshaping the past in ways that preserve their fragile self-image. They cannot say, "I hurt you," so they say, "You misunderstood me." They cannot admit, "I lost control," so they say, "You provoked me." Every memory becomes a tool, every conversation a battlefield where they fight not for clarity, but for dominance. They know that whoever controls the story controls perception, and in their world, perception is everything. Reality itself becomes a fluid concept, something to be molded and twisted until it serves their emotional survival. You'll see it in the way they talk about the past. Events that were once crystal clear become distorted through the filter of their ego. They'll insist that they were the one mistreated, that they sacrificed everything for you, that you were ungrateful or cruel. It's a form of psychological warfare designed to confuse you, to make you question your own memory and doubt your own sanity. This rewriting is how they attempt to reclaim control after losing it. By changing the story, they change the emotional balance of power. They want you to second guess your experience, to feel guilt where you should feel anger, to feel confusion where you once felt certainty. If they can distort your sense of reality, they can still dominate you even from afar. Inside their mind, the rewriting process serves another purpose. It keeps them from facing shame. Shame is something a narcissist cannot bear. It is the emotional equivalent of acid to their false self. When they are exposed, that shame rises to the surface like a tidal wave threatening to drown them. So they twist the narrative to project it outward. If they can convince themselves that you are the problem, then they don't have to feel the burning truth that they were the one who caused harm. This projection is not just manipulation, it's emotional self-preservation. The rewritten story is their psychological shield against the unbearable truth of their own moral corruption. They'll often tell this revised story to others, recruiting new listeners into their narrative. They will paint you as unstable, ungrateful, or even dangerous. The more people believe their version of events, the safer they feel from accountability. They thrive on validation, and each person who buys into their distorted history becomes another layer of insulation between them and the truth. In this way, their rewriting is both internal and external. It protects their ego internally and rebuilds their image externally. They must ensure that the world never sees the person behind the mask, so they rewrite history to keep the mask intact. It's a form of psychological theater in which they are both the playwright and the lead actor, constantly revising the script whenever reality threatens to expose the truth. As they continue this process, they start to believe their own lies. This is one of the most chilling aspects of the narcissist psychology. Over time, their mind fuses the distortion with reality until the two become indistinguishable. They genuinely come to see themselves as the victim, the misunderstood hero, or the righteous one who was wronged. This self-deception allows them to continue their life without the burden of guilt. It gives them permission to repeat the same patterns again and again with new people, each time armed with a revised story of how they were betrayed or mistreated. The rewriting of history becomes a cycle that keeps their false self alive while keeping growth and transformation perpetually out of reach. For the person who has defeated them, watching this process unfold can be deeply frustrating. You know the truth, you lived it, you carry the scars. And yet, the narcissist moves through the world telling a story where they are the wounded one and you are the villain. It's meant to provoke you, to lure you back into the game, to make you fight for your truth while they twist it further. But that's the trap. They want your outrage because your emotional response feeds their narrative. The more you defend yourself, the more they can spin it as evidence of your instability. In their mind, control doesn't require the truth. It only requires your reaction. Beneath this rewriting lies a profound spiritual sickness. The demonic narcissist cannot face the reality of who they are because they've made a pact, whether consciously or not, with deceit itself. Their survival depends on the continuous denial of truth. They sacrifice integrity for control, honesty for appearance, humility for pride. Every time they rewrite history, they sink deeper into a kind of psychological darkness where truth no longer matters, only perception. And yet, that very illusion becomes their prison. They are enslaved to the false narrative they create, forced to live in a world that exists only in their mind, constantly defending lies that can never truly protect them. This rewriting of history is, at its core, an act of desperation. It reveals the fragility of their entire existence. When the truth emerges, they can no longer rely on manipulation to keep the world aligned with their ego. So they rewrite it. They must. It's the only way they can continue to live within their illusion of control. They twist time, memory, and morality to restore themselves to a position of power. But each lie distances them further from reality, from connection, from the possibility of genuine redemption. What remains is a hollow version of a story that once had truth, now rewritten into something unrecognizable, serving only as a monument to their fear of facing who they truly are. ChatGPT said, "The smear campaign is the narcissist's weapon of survival once they've been exposed or defeated. It is their most calculated and vindictive response to the loss of control, designed to destroy your credibility, invert the narrative, and regain psychological dominance by poisoning the perceptions of others. When their illusion begins to crumble, when you have seen behind the mask and walked away, they enter a state of panic. The narcissist cannot afford to let others see the truth about who they are because their entire identity is built on performance and reputation. So they do what they do best. They manipulate the story, but this time their stage is not your relationship, it's the world around you. They need to turn others against you before you can expose them, because in their mind, Perception is power, and whoever controls the narrative controls reality. The smear campaign begins subtly. They start by planting seeds of doubt in the minds of mutual acquaintances. It often begins with carefully worded statements that appear concerned or confused. I don't know what happened, they just changed, or I tried everything, but they became so cold. These phrases are designed to elicit sympathy while painting you as unstable or cruel. They act like the wounded party, the betrayed victim of your supposed mistreatment. This is a strategic inversion because by the time you realize what's happening, the web has already been spun. People begin to question your behavior, your motives, your sanity. The narcissist, meanwhile, plays the role of the calm, composed truth teller who's just trying to make sense of what went wrong. They create a moral fog in which the lines between truth and lies become almost impossible to distinguish. What makes this tactic so powerful is that it appeals to the basic instincts of others. People are naturally drawn to empathize with someone who seems hurt or wrong. The narcissist exploits this instinct with surgical precision. They know how to sound sincere, how to cry on command, how to weave just enough truth into their lies to make them believable. They know that most people don't want to get involved in conflict, so they craft their story in a way that positions them as the reasonable one. They make you look like the aggressor, the ungrateful one, the unstable one. The more you defend yourself, the more they twist your defense into evidence of guilt. The smear campaign is psychological chess, and the narcissist is always 3 moves ahead. Internally, this campaign serves a deeper purpose. It's not just about destroying your reputation. It's about preserving their delusion. When you expose them, you ruptured their fantasy of control and superiority. The smear campaign becomes a way to restore that illusion, to rewrite the social reality so that they are still the one in power. By convincing others that you are the problem, they can convince themselves that they remain blameless. It's a form of collective gaslighting where they manipulate the perceptions of the community to stabilize their own fractured sense of self. The more people they recruit into their version of events, the more validated they feel. Every person who believes their lies becomes a shield against the truth they're desperate to escape. This campaign often spreads like wildfire because it thrives on gossip and emotional reaction. The narcissist will weaponize social media, conversations, mutual friends, and even family members to carry their message. They tailor their lies to fit the audience, knowing exactly what to say to appeal to each person's emotions and biases. To one, they might claim you're cold and heartless. To another, they'll say you're mentally unstable or abusive. They mirror the fears and expectations of their listeners, shaping their words to elicit the strongest emotional response. It's psychological warfare disguised as concern, vengeance disguised as sorrow. The demonic narcissist understands that if they can control what others believe about you, they don't need to control you directly anymore. They can isolate you through perception. As the smear campaign unfolds, you may find yourself feeling trapped in a nightmare of distortion. People you once trusted may turn cold or distant, influenced by the lies they've been fed. The narcissist thrives in this environment of confusion and division. They know that isolation weakens their target. They want you to question yourself, to feel alone, to doubt your worth. It's not enough for them to have lost control over you. They want to ensure no one else sees your truth either. The smear campaign is their insurance policy against exposure, their way of rewriting the social script so that you become the villain in their story. This is how they feed the illusion that they remain powerful even after defeat. But beneath the outward confidence and strategic manipulation lies something far more pitiful: fear. The narcissist wages a smear campaign not from strength but from terror. They are terrified that people will see the same darkness you saw. They are terrified that their facade will crumble beyond repair. Every lie they spread, every story they invent, is an act of desperation to outrun the truth. The demonic narcissist cannot confront their own reflection, so they project it onto you. Every accusation they make is a confession in disguise. When they call you manipulative, deceitful, unstable, or cruel, they're describing themselves. It's a psychological inversion meant to disorient both you and the audience. They attack you with the very traits they can't bear to acknowledge in themselves. The smear campaign also reveals the narcissist's deep understanding of human weakness. They know that most people are uncomfortable with complexity, that they prefer simple narratives with clear heroes and villains. So they simplify the story. They are the victim, you are the villain. It's easy for people to digest, easy to repeat, and easy to believe. The more they repeat it, the more it solidifies in the collective mind. Eventually, their version of reality becomes the dominant one, and you find yourself defending against ghosts, accusations that never happened, lies that have taken on a life of their own. This is how the narcissist maintains power long after the relationship or conflict has ended. And yet, while their campaign might seem successful on the surface, it comes at a great cost to them. Every lie they tell ties them tighter to their own falsehood. They must maintain the story, remember the details, keep up the act. It's exhausting, and over time, cracks begin to appear. People notice inconsistencies, patterns of manipulation, and subtle contradictions. The truth, no matter how buried, begins to seep through the cracks. The narcissist senses this and becomes even more desperate, spreading new lies to cover old ones, manipulating harder, shouting louder. The smear campaign becomes a cycle they cannot escape, a prison of their own making, where they are forever running from the truth that still waits in the silence they fear to face. ChatGPT said, when a demonic narcissist feels their power slipping, they will begin to recruit enablers to help sustain their collapsing illusion. They understand instinctively that control requires witnesses. That influence must be reinforced through others who will echo their lies and validate their delusions. These enablers become the lifeblood of the narcissist's false reality. They are not always malicious themselves. Sometimes they are simply naive, empathetic, or easily manipulated. The narcissist knows how to identify these people, the ones who crave approval, the ones who avoid conflict, the ones who mistake charm for sincerity. Once identified, they are drawn into the narcissist's orbit with a mixture of flattery, pity, and persuasion until they begin to see the world through the narcissist's distorted lens. Recruitment begins quietly. The narcissist plants small seeds of suggestion, subtle comments about you, fragments of a story that cast them in a sympathetic light. I've been trying so hard, but they just won't listen. Or, I don't know what happened, they just changed. These are the opening moves. They're testing the listener's emotional temperature, seeing who will respond with concern, who will ask questions, who will offer validation. The ones who do become the first to be drawn into the web. The narcissist rewards their sympathy with more truth, more details about how cruelly they were treated, how misunderstood they are. Slowly, the listener becomes emotionally invested in the story. They begin to defend the narcissist, to see them as the victim, to question your integrity. The transformation is complete when they begin spreading the narcissist's version of events themselves, unaware that they've become a pawn in someone else's psychological game. These enablers serve multiple functions. They are shields, protecting the narcissist from accountability by deflecting blame and absorbing scrutiny. They are mirrors, reflecting back the narcissist's distorted self-image and keeping their delusions alive. And they are soldiers, carrying out the smear campaign on the narcissist's behalf. The narcissist rarely has to do all the work themselves. Once the enablers are properly conditioned, they take over the task of spreading misinformation, questioning your credibility, and reinforcing the narcissist's narrative. The brilliance of this strategy lies in its deniability. The narcissist can sit back and appear innocent, claiming, I never said that, while their enablers do the damage for them. The relationship between the narcissist and their enablers is symbiotic but unstable. The narcissist feeds on admiration and loyalty, and the enabler feeds on the illusion of importance. The enabler often believes they are helping a misunderstood person, standing by someone who has been wronged. They feel morally righteous, unaware that they are being used as a tool to maintain someone else's ego. The narcissist gives them just enough validation to keep them compliant. They may praise their loyalty, confide in them, or make them feel special for understanding what no one else does. But it's all transactional. The moment an enabler questions the narrative or withdraws support, they are discarded and replaced. To the narcissist, loyalty is not reciprocal, it's conditional. It exists only as long as it serves their agenda. The recruitment of enablers also fulfills a deeper psychological need for the narcissist. It reassures them that they still have power, that their charm and manipulation still work, that they can still shape reality through others. When they've lost control of you, they must find someone else to control, someone to keep their delusion alive. The enablers become extensions of their will, proxies through which they can continue their psychological warfare. Through them, the narcissist can still reach you indirectly, through gossip, through judgment, through social isolation. They don't need to confront you directly to inflict damage. The enablers do it for them, often without realizing the cruelty of their actions. Over time, these enablers often start to show signs of cognitive dissonance. They notice inconsistencies in the narcissist's stories, see flashes of cruelty, or experience moments of discomfort that don't fit the image they were sold. But the narcissist knows how to manage that too. They'll use emotional manipulation, guilt, flattery, or even tears to reset the narrative. They'll say things like, "I can't believe you'd think that about me after everything I've been through," or "I thought you knew me better." The enabler, not wanting to appear cruel or disloyal, suppresses their doubt and doubles down on their support. Each cycle of reinforcement deepens their entanglement, making it harder for them to separate truth from manipulation. In the larger picture, these enablers become instruments in a moral inversion. They end up protecting the abuser and vilifying the victim, all while believing they are standing for justice. This is the true genius of the demonic narcissist. They manipulate not just individuals, but entire moral frameworks. They convince others that good is evil and evil is good, that compassion for them is righteousness, and that questioning them is cruelty. They create an emotional atmosphere where speaking the truth feels wrong and defending yourself looks aggressive. By surrounding themselves with enablers who echo these distortions, they build a fortress of delusion that shields them from reality. Eventually, however, this web begins to fray. The narcissist's insatiable need for validation drives them to manipulate even their allies, and over time, their contradictions accumulate. Enablers begin to notice patterns, the same stories told about different people, the same complaints repeated across relationships, the same emotional chaos following every conflict. The cognitive dissonance becomes too loud to ignore. Some enablers quietly withdraw, realizing they've been used. Others turn against the narcissist, exposing them to the very truth they've tried so hard to suppress. When that happens, the narcissist responds with predictable fury, launching new smear campaigns against their former allies. To them, loyalty is disposable, and betrayal is anything less than absolute devotion. This process of recruiting and discarding enablers repeats endlessly because the narcissist cannot survive without external validation. They cannot exist in isolation. They require constant mirrors to reflect their fantasy back at them. The enablers are both their audience and their camouflage, the people who keep their false self alive. When one set of enablers begins to crumble, they move on to the next, leaving behind confusion, broken trust, and emotional wreckage. It's a pattern as old as their pathology, a perpetual cycle of seduction, exploitation, an abandonment that ensures they never face the one thing they fear most, being seen for who they truly are. ChatGPT said, "The moment the mask of superiority begins to dissolve, the demonic narcissist is thrust into a state of inner chaos they can neither understand nor control. Their entire existence depends on maintaining the illusion of being untouchable, powerful, and always one step above everyone else. That superiority is not just an attitude, it is their armor, their justification for every act of manipulation and cruelty. When that armor cracks, when their control is broken and their lies no longer work, they feel naked before the truth. It is not just embarrassment they experience, it is annihilation. They have spent their entire life constructing a false image to protect themselves from the unbearable reality of their own inadequacy. And when that image dissolves, the true self they've been hiding from begins to surface like a ghost that cannot be exorcised. At first, they fight the collapse with denial. They will double down on their arrogance, speaking with even more authority, pretending to be unaffected, as if the exposure hasn't touched them. You'll hear them insist that they are fine, that nothing's wrong, that you've misjudged them, or that you'll regret what you've done. This is the last stand of their false self, a desperate performance meant to convince both you and themselves that their superiority is still intact. But beneath the surface, a different process is unfolding, a rapid psychological disintegration that eats away at their sense of identity. The confidence that once fueled their manipulation becomes hollow. Their mind races to rebuild the illusion, but it's no longer believable, not even to them. They begin to see cracks in the reflection they once adored. That superiority was never real power. It was a shield against their deep-seated inferiority. The narcissist's grandiosity exists only to cover the emptiness they've always felt inside. When the mask starts to crumble, the emptiness begins to scream. They feel worthless, terrified, and enraged all at once. These emotions are unbearable to them because they've spent their lives rejecting vulnerability. Instead of processing these feelings, they externalize them, they lash out, accuse, mock, and degrade others to reassert dominance. It's an attempt to escape the internal collapse by projecting it outward. If they can make you feel small again, if they can humiliate or frighten you, then maybe their illusion of superiority will be restored. But it never lasts. Each outburst only deepens the cracks. Each desperate act of control reveals how powerless they've become. Their behavior becomes erratic and self-contradictory. One moment they act grandiose and dismissive, the next they crumble into self-pity and victimhood. These oscillations are the psychological equivalent of drowning. They are grasping for any emotional lifeline that will make them feel in control again. When they can't dominate you, they'll try to elicit sympathy instead. When sympathy doesn't work, they'll revert to rage. The pattern continues until they exhaust themselves or find a new target. Someone new to manipulate, someone who doesn't yet see the cracks in their armor. Their need for superiority drives them relentlessly toward fresh supply, because without an audience to admire or fear them, they have no sense of existence. Inside, their mind is in turmoil. They begin to experience intrusive thoughts about failure and insignificance. Their superiority complex was a structure that kept those thoughts buried, but now that it's dissolving, the repressed self-hatred begins to leak out. They feel exposed, vulnerable, and weak, emotions they associate with humiliation. The demonic narcissist cannot tolerate humility because humility requires self-awareness, and self-awareness would mean acknowledging the pain they've caused. Instead, they transform that vulnerability into bitterness. They begin to despise anyone who reminds them of their loss of power, especially you, the person who saw through them. In their mind, you become the symbol of their defeat, the mirror that reflected their failure. That hatred becomes obsessive because it's the only thing that temporarily masks the emptiness underneath. As the mask dissolves, their social persona begins to fracture too. People who once admired them start noticing inconsistencies, glimpses of cruelty, signs of deceit. The narcissist feels this shift and reacts with panic. They try to overcompensate, performing exaggerated gestures of goodness or competence to rebuild their image. They might become suddenly charitable, apologetic, or spiritual, pretending to have learned from the experience. But these performances lack substance. They are hollow gestures meant to salvage reputation, not expressions of genuine remorse. They don't want redemption, they want restoration of their superiority. And when that restoration fails, the desperation grows. The once grand figure begins to shrink into a restless, paranoid shell, consumed by the fear of being ordinary, of being forgotten, of no longer being the center of anyone's world. This phase of disintegration often leads to reckless behavior. The narcissist may indulge in impulsive decisions, financial risks, promiscuity, substance abuse, anything that distracts them from the crumbling illusion. They chase pleasure because pleasure is the only feeling that temporarily silences the despair, but it never lasts. The more they chase it, the more their inner emptiness expands. The superiority they once projected was their God, their source of meaning, and now that God has died. They are left wandering in a psychological wasteland, searching for new idols to worship attention, admiration, chaos. They would rather destroy everything around them than confront the possibility that they are not superior at all. Even as they continue to pretend, their eyes give them away. There's a dullness that replaces the once calculated gleam, a heaviness that no amount of charm can disguise. They know something has been lost forever, though they can't name it. The superiority that once made them feel invincible now feels like a mask that's too heavy to wear. They begin to envy the authenticity of those they once despised. The irony is that the very people they sought to dominate, the honest, the kind, the self-aware, possess the qualities they secretly long for but can never embody. Their mask dissolves completely when they realize that the power they fought so hard to maintain was an illusion all along, that superiority without integrity is emptiness disguised as strength. The narcissist's collapse into desperation marks the beginning of their internal decay. Their arrogance becomes anxiety, their confidence turns brittle, their charm fades into manipulation that no longer convinces anyone. They are haunted by their own exposure, by the memory of the moment someone saw the truth behind the performance. Every attempt to rebuild the illusion fails faster than the last because each lie now echoes with the sound of its own hollowness. Their once flawless mask, the symbol of their superiority, lies in fragments, and though they will try to piece it back together, the cracks will always remain visible to those who know how to look.